The Colosseum, located in the city of Rome, is one of the first structures that comes to mind when Roman architecture and engineering are mentioned. This magnificent building, constructed by Emperor Vespasian, with the wealth and spoils he gained from suppressing the Jewish revolt, continues to capture the interest of historians and tourists today, although it always greets us with one side damaged. So, where is the missing and incomplete part of this magnificent structure? How and why is half of Rome's largest amphitheater missing? Welcome to Encyclopedia Historica. In this video, we'll talk about the Colosseum, one of the symbols of the Roman Empire, and its missing half. For approximately 500 years, the Colosseum was the most impressive arena of the Roman Empire. Emperors held spectacles here to astonish, entertain, and distract the Roman people. Exotic animals from the farthest corners of the world were hunted with gold-tipped spears. Criminals were devoured by bears in mythological plays. The empire's greatest gladiators dueled on the bloody sands. Over the course of half a millennium, the Colosseum underwent a series of long reconstruction phases. The most significant occurred in the early 3rd century when a fire destroyed the entire upper tier of seats. Even the rapid repairs of the damaged and burnt sections took 5 years to complete. Later, a series of earthquakes in the 5th century caused significant damage to the structure, which was never fully repaired. This was because, at the time, the empire was struggling with the Visigoth sacking of the capital, the weakening of Rome due to the migration period, and finally, the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476. The spectacles held in the Colosseum also changed over the centuries. Unsurprisingly, the most astonishing shows were organized during the empire's golden days. For example, to celebrate Trajan's Dacian victory, games lasting 123 days were held, during which 5,000 pairs of gladiators fought and 11,000 animals were killed. However, from the mid-3rd century onward, the quality of the games began to decline. Later Roman emperors were poorer and more careless than their predecessors and preferred to spend most of their time and money away from the city of Rome. Additionally, many of the most exciting animals had been hunted to near extinction, and the price of gladiators continued to rise. Eventually, gladiator fights stopped altogether. For a time, the execution of Christians, especially as anti-Christian sentiment rose, kept the Colosseum full. But the large-scale shows in the Colosseum ended in the 5th century as the main fights decreased, and emperors no longer wanted to spend money on games. A few centuries later, no one remained who knew what the Colosseum was for. Some claimed it was a temple of the sun, originally crowned with an enormous golden dome. Others believed it was a temple dedicated to all gods, with a large statue of Jupiter in the arena. There were even those who claimed it was used for summoning demons. By the beginning of the Middle Ages, the Colosseum was already semi-ruined, and over the next 1,000 years, it continued to deteriorate little by little. The primary cause of this decay was earthquakes. Like any tall stone structure, the Colosseum was vulnerable to earthquake damage, and due to the negligence of its builders, some parts of the building were particularly sensitive to tremors. The large concrete foundations of the Colosseum on the northern side reached down to bedrock. However, on the southern side, the foundation sat on water-saturated sediment. This soil, not ideal for supporting a large structure, amplified earthquake tremors, causing the southern half of the building to suffer more damage and collapse during quakes. Yet the Colosseum's greatest enemy was neither earthquakes nor nature. Its biggest enemy was the Romans themselves. The walls of the building were made of fine limestone called travertine, and the seats were made of marble. Both materials were appealing building stones for medieval architects. Travertine and marble could be reused or burned in kilns to make lime mortar. The looting of the Colosseum stones began while the last games were still being held in the arena and continued for over 1,000 years. The Colosseum was not just a quarry. For much of the Middle Ages, hundreds of people lived in the ruined vaults and passageways. There were gardens and houses with small yards. There were shops with wooden roofs and warehouse ceilings. There were stables, churches, and even a fully functional castle for a time. Surprisingly, most of the medieval Colosseum's residents were lime burners, spending their days demolishing the very building they sheltered in. Thanks to their efforts, the Colosseum gradually became more and more uninhabitable. Finally, in 1349, an earthquake toppled the Colosseum's massive columns, completely destroying the southern half and creating a huge pile of rubble. Over the next 4 centuries, this pile of stone was used in the construction of half the churches and other public buildings in Renaissance Rome. After all this looting and earthquakes, it might seem surprising that the Colosseum is still standing. The reason so much remains is, surprisingly, due to a form of preservation. As mentioned earlier, the northern side of the Colosseum was always more resistant to earthquake damage because it was built on solid ground. But the reason it was spared from being dismantled by scavengers and lime burners is thanks to the intervention of the popes. The northern side of the Colosseum faced a processional road that connected the Lateran Palace to the Vatican. The popes protected this section to prevent the Colosseum from being reduced to ruins. Perhaps they preferred seeing this majestic structure along the ceremonial route rather than a pile of rubble. In short, the Colosseum's partial survival is due to its foundation being built on solid ground and the Pope's desire to preserve its presence along a key procession route. Today, it continues to defy time as one of modern Rome's most magnificent and tourist-attracting structures. Thank you for watching Encyclopedia Historica. If you found our video helpful, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to avoid missing out on new and interesting videos.